The mafia boss recognized her perfume. "Everyone out!" Then he locked the doors. The air in the penthouse suite on the 30th floor was thick enough to choke on. It smelled of stale cigar smoke, 20-year-old whiskey, and bad faith. Vincent Romano sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, his stillness a stark contrast to the agitation radiating from the men across from him. His suit was custom, dark charcoal, and showed no creases. His face, all sharp angles and shadows, showed nothing at all. He was listening, but his eyes were fixed on the panoramic view of the city skyline, where the late afternoon sun was beginning to bleed into the horizon. "The docks on the south side are ours. Romano. They've been Riker territory for a decade." The speaker was Silas Riker, a man who looked like he'd been assembled from spare parts in a butcher shop. He leaned forward, his expensive shirt straining against his gut. "This ceasefire doesn't mean you just waltz in and take our primary import line." Vincent's consigliere, Marco, a thin, older man with weary eyes, started to speak. "Silas, the agreement was about stabilization, not maintaining a monopoly that—" Vincent raised a single finger. Marco fell silent. The entire room fell silent. Vincent finally turned his gaze from the window, pinning Silas Riker with an assessing stare. "You use the docks for trafficking. We use them for logistics. Your business is messy. It draws heat. My business is clean. You are confusing tradition with good management." "Clean?" Riker let out a barking laugh. "We're the same. You and me." "We are not," Vincent said. The words were quiet, but they landed with the finality of a gavel. "We are discussing a truce because you are loud, you are sloppy, and you are costing me money. So, you will concede the waterfront terminals, and in exchange, I will allow you to continue breathing." Riker's face purpled. His men shifted, hands moving subtly toward their jackets. Vincent's men, stationed by the walls, remained immobile, but their focus sharpened. The tension in the suite tightened, becoming a physical weight. It was in that precise moment of strained silence, as Riker opened his mouth to escalate, that the air changed. It was not a sound, it was a scent. It cut through the heavy odors of smoke and alcohol with the impossible delicacy of a razor. Jasmine, and under the jasmine, a faint, soft trace of powder. Vincent's breath caught in his throat. It was not just a perfume, it was a memory. It was the scent of summer nights on the veranda of the family estate. It was the scent of laughter he had tried to forget, of a betrayal that had carved a hollow space in his chest. It was the scent of her. His focus snapped from Silas Riker. His eyes darted across the room. Who? A woman in a standard black and white server's uniform was moving silently along the buffet table against the far wall, refilling a silver water pitcher. She had dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She was keeping her head down, avoiding eye contact, just a phantom in the room. But the scent drifted from her as she moved. Vincent felt the blood drain from his face, replaced by a sudden, glacial rage. It was impossible. She was dead. She had to be dead, or if not dead, vanished so completely that she might as well have been. Silas Riker, oblivious, slammed a meaty hand on the table. "You think you can just dictate terms. The Riker family doesn't bow to—" Vincent stood. The heavy chair scraped back. A violent tearing sound in the quiet room. Everyone froze. Riker's words died in his throat. Every man in the room, his, theirs, tensed. Vincent's eyes were locked on the server, who had paused, her hand trembling slightly on the pitcher. She hadn't looked up yet, not yet. "Get out," Vincent said. His voice was low, unrecognizable. Silas Riker looked confused. "What did you say?" "Everyone, out!" The roar was primal. It shattered the room's fragile peace. Men scrambled to their feet, chairs toppled. Riker's men drew their weapons. Vincent's men matched them instantly, the sound of metal clearing leather filling the air. "Boss," Marco said, stepping toward him, his face pale with alarm. "The meeting is over," Vincent snarled, his gaze never leaving the woman by the wall. She had finally looked up, her eyes wide, locked on his, and in that instant, the world stopped. It was her. It was Mia. "I said, out," Vincent repeated. His voice dropping back to that lethal quiet, he walked past Silas Riker as if the man were nothing more than furniture, his entire being focused on the ghost by the catering table. His men understood. Marco moved to the door, gesturing forcefully. "You heard him! Everyone, move! Now!" "Romano, you can't just—" Riker protested, but Vincent's soldiers were already physically herding the rival gang toward the elevators, their expressions grim. The truce was broken, or at least suspended, by a force none of them understood. The room emptied in a rush of curses and shuffling feet. Marco was the last to leave, his worried eyes meeting Vincent's. "Boss, what is it?" "Lock the floor down. No one up, no one down. And get my car," Vincent commanded, his back to his man. "Vincent, go." Marco hesitated, then nodded sharply, pulling the heavy suite door shut. The silence that descended was absolute, broken only by the frantic pounding of Mia's heart, which Vincent felt he could almost hear from across the room. She hadn't run. She stood paralyzed, her face a mask of disbelief and pure, unadulterated terror. 6 years since she had vanished. 6 years since his brother Leo had been gunned down in an alley, and she, his fiancée, had disappeared with $200,000 of Romano cash. He walked toward her, each step measured, deliberate. The sound of his leather shoes on the plush carpet was the only sound. He reached the main door and, without taking his eyes off her, engaged the heavy brass deadbolt. Click! The sound made her jump, a small, terrified gasp escaping her lips. She was thinner than he remembered. The life had been scraped from her. The vibrant woman who had laughed at his brother's stupid jokes was gone, replaced by this worn, trembling creature in a cheap polyester uniform. But the eyes, they were the same. Wide, green, and currently staring at him as if he were the devil himself. "Mia," he said. The name tasted like ash in his mouth. "No," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse. "Please, my name is Anna. I'm just working." He let out a short, mirthless laugh. "Anna, you change your name, but you wear the same perfume." He stopped about 10 feet from her. "You always did love that jasmine. You think I'd forget?" "Vincent, please, I don't know anything." "You know how to be dead," he said, his voice dropping. "That's what you were. You were dead. For 6 years. You were the woman who betrayed my brother and ran." He saw her flinch, the accusation hitting her like a physical blow. She braced herself against the catering cart. "I didn't," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't betray anyone." "Then where did you go?" He stepped closer. "Where did you go? Mia? Leo was buried in the rain, and you were gone. So was the money." As he looked at her, the cheap, poorly lit suite dissolved. He saw her on the vast, sun-drenched lawn of the Romano estate, her white summer dress a stark contrast to his own dark suit. He saw his younger brother, Leo, loud and brash, pulling her in for a kiss. And he remembered the sharp, unwelcome pang of jealousy he had felt. He had despised it. He had despised her for making him feel it. Then, just as quickly, the memory soured. He saw the docks, the flashing lights of police cars he'd paid to keep away, the black sedan, windows spiderwebbed with bullet holes. He saw Leo, slumped over the wheel, his white tuxedo for the engagement party stained crimson, and Mia, gone, vanished. The whispers had started immediately. She was in on it. She set him up. She'd been seeing a Riker lieutenant. The betrayal had solidified into fact. It was easier to believe she was a traitor than to believe she was simply gone. "You set him up," he said, the 6-year-old rage surfacing, raw and hot. "You led my brother to slaughter. For what? For Riker's money? For one of them?" That broke her paralysis. "No," her voice cracked, tears flooding her eyes. "No, I ran. Vincent, I ran because I was scared." "Scared of what? Of me? Of them?" "The ones who killed him. They came to the apartment. They said if I ever spoke, if I ever came back, they would kill me just like they killed him. They said you would be next." He stared at her, searching her face for the lie. He wanted to find it. It would be so much simpler if she were just the traitor he'd believed her to be. But all he saw was a desperate, agonizing fear that mirrored the terror he'd seen in her eyes 6 years ago, the night before the ambush. "Who?" he demanded. "Who told you that?" I don't know his name," she stammered, backing away until she hit the wall. "He was one of Riker's men. He had a scar on his face." Jace Hollow. The name hit Vincent's mind instantly. Riker's second in command. The man he'd been negotiating with today was just a puppet. Jace was the one pulling the strings. "You've been here? In this city?" he asked, his mind racing. "No, I left. I went west. I just came back 6 months ago. I thought it was safe. I thought everyone would be gone. Or they'd have forgotten." She was weeping openly now, her composure shattered. "I'm just a caterer. Vincent, I swear, I'm just trying to stay alive. I'm not in your world. I'm not in anyone's world. The moment you stood next to Leo, you were in my world, Yimwei," Vincent said, his voice hard. "The moment you disappeared, you were drowned in it. You don't get to just come back." He saw the realization dawning on her face. The implications of this meeting, of him clearing the room. "Oh, God," she whispered, sliding down the wall slightly. They saw you find me." "What?" "In the hall. Before the meeting. One of Riker's men. The one with the scar. Jace. He was in the lobby when my team arrived." Her breathing hitched. "He didn't see me. I hid. I thought I was safe. But just now, when you shouted, when you cleared the room for me," her eyes, wide and terrified, met his. "He knows I'm back, and he knows that you know." Vincent stood frozen. The perfume hadn't just brought back a ghost. It had just lit a fuse. The woman he had spent 6 years hating as a traitor was alive. She was terrified, and she had just walked back into the very war she'd been running from. And he, by recognizing her, had just painted the target on her back himself. He didn't speak on the ride. The windows of the black sedan were tinted so dark the city lights blurred into meaningless streaks of neon and white. Mia sat on the far side of the plush leather seat, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap her knuckles were white. She was still wearing the server's uniform, a stark, humiliating reminder of how far she had fallen. Vincent stared straight ahead, his profile rigid, a sculpture carved from unforgiving granite. He had bundled her out of a service exit, his hand firmly on her upper arm, his men materializing from the shadows of the hotel garage. They were in the car and moving before she could even process the escape. The car slowed, turning into a subterranean garage that smelled of damp concrete and new paint, an apartment building, but one that looked more like a fortress. It was all glass and cold steel, utterly anonymous. His men, 2 in the front, 2 in a trailing car, flanked them into a private elevator. The apartment was like the building, expensive, empty, and cold. It was a place designed for temporary stays, lacking any personal touch. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city sprawling below, a carpet of indifferent lights. Vincent shed his suit jacket, tossing it onto a minimalist leather sofa. He rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt, revealing forearms corded with muscle and dark with hair. He moved to the kitchen, which was part of the vast open room, and pulled a bottle of whiskey from a cabinet. He poured 3 fingers into a heavy glass, the amber liquid catching the light. He did not offer her one. He turned, leaning back against the marble counter, and took a slow sip. He watched her. Mia hadn't moved from the center of the room. She looked small, lost in the cavernous space. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing with the glass toward the sofa. She obeyed, perching on the absolute edge of the cushion, as if ready to bolt. "Start from the beginning," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of the rage from the hotel suite, which was somehow more terrifying. This was not anger, it was judgment. "The night Leo died, tell me everything." Mia swallowed, her throat dry. "I told you. I ran." "You ran," he repeated, taking another sip, "with $200,000 of my family's money." "No," her voice was sharp. "I didn't take any money. I left with my purse and the clothes I was wearing. I didn't know about any money. Leo was supposed to be bringing that cash to the engagement party, a buy-in for a new venture. It was in his car, the car he was shot in, the car you were supposed to be in with him. The money vanished, and so did you." He set the glass down with a heavy thud on the counter. "It does not look good. Mia," tears welled again, hot and immediate. "I wasn't in the car. He told me to meet him there. He said he had one last stop to make. He was late. I was waiting at the restaurant. I waited for an hour." She was back there, in the restaurant, wearing a green silk dress she had spent too much money on. She remembered the waiter looking at her with pity, the untouched breadbasket, the growing knot of dread in her stomach. "I called his phone, over and over. No answer. I took a cab back to our apartment. I thought maybe he forgot. Maybe he'd gone home." Her voice dropped to a whisper. The door was open. Vincent's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. He pushed off the counter, moving closer. "I walked in," she continued, her hands twisting. "The lights were off. I called his name, and a man stepped out of the bedroom. He had a gun." She looked up at Vincent, her gaze desperate, pleading with him to believe her. "It was him, the man from the hotel today, the one with the scar." "Jace Hollow," Vincent said. "The name was a curse. He told me Leo was dead. He said it was a message. He said things had gotten messy and loose ends needed to be tied up, and I was a loose end. He said the Romanos would think I did it, that I set Leo up." She remembered the cold metal of the gun pressed to her temple, the smell of gunpowder and cheap cologne on the man. "He put the gun in my mouth," she choked out, the shame and terror of it flooding back. "He told me I had two choices. I could be found in the river or I could disappear. He gave me 1 hour. He said if I ever contacted anyone, your mother, the police, he would find me and finish the job. He said he'd enjoy it." Vincent's jaw was tight, a muscle jumping. His anger, which had been directed at her, was visibly shifting, turning outward. He was looking at her, but he was seeing Jace Hollow. He was seeing the disrespect, the audacity. "He killed my brother," Vincent said, his voice a low growl. "And he used you as a shield. He silenced you to protect their secrets, to make sure the blame fell on a runaway girl." "I ran," Mia sobbed, the dam finally breaking. 6 years of pent-up fear, loneliness, and suffocating silence erupted. "I ran to the bus station with nothing. I bought a ticket to Portland with the $80 in my wallet. I got a job washing dishes under the name Sarah. Then I moved to a small town in Nevada. I was Jane. I worked in a diner. I lived in apartments that smelled like mold and desperation. I changed my hair. I wore glasses. I looked over my shoulder every second of every day for 6 years." She buried her face in her hands, her body shaking with the force of her grief. "I lost everything. I lost my name. I lost my life. All because I fell in love with the wrong family." Vincent stood over her, his shadow falling across her. The rage was still there, but its edges had blurred. He saw the thinness of her wrists, the cheap, scuffed shoes she wore. He saw the haunted look in her eyes, a look he recognized. It was the look of survival. He had spent 6 years cultivating his hatred for her. It had been a necessary fiction, a way to cauterize the wound of his brother's death. To believe she was a traitor was to impose order on a chaotic, senseless act of violence. But the woman weeping in front of him was not a cold-blooded conspirator. She was collateral damage. Slowly, as if his hand were impossibly heavy, he reached out. He didn't touch her face or her hair. He laid his hand on her shoulder. His touch was firm, grounding. She flinched at the contact, then starved for any human kindness. She leaned into it. She didn't embrace him. She just let the weight of his hand anchor her. She cried for a long time. Vincent remained standing, his hand on her shoulder, a silent, unmoving guardian. When her sobs finally quieted, she wiped her face with the back of her hands, looking raw and exhausted. She looked up at him, her green eyes clouded with misery. "You know the worst part?" she whispered. He said nothing, just watched her. The whole time, living in those awful rooms, pretending to be someone else, when I let myself think about this city, about your family. Her voice caught. "It wasn't Leo I missed." The air in the room became charged, intimate. The city lights outside seemed to dim, pulling all the focus onto the space between them. "It was always you. she confessed, the words tearing out of her. "I hated myself for it. I was engaged to your brother, but he was loud and he was bright, but he never saw me. Not really. You did. You were always in the corner, watching. You saw everything. You made me feel safer than he ever did." Vincent's hand on her shoulder tightened. He remembered. He remembered watching her, telling himself it was because he didn't trust her. But it was a lie. He had watched her because he couldn't look away. He had buried that attraction under a mountain of duty and loyalty to his brother. And when Leo died, he had buried it under hate. Now, the mountain was gone. He moved his hand from her shoulder to her jaw, his thumb brushing away a stray tear on her cheek. Her skin was soft, cold. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. He didn't plan it. It was not a decision. It was an inevitability. 6 years of grief, 6 years of lies, 6 years of suffocating longing. He leaned down, and the small distance between them vanished. His lips met hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was brutal in its honesty, a raw expression of everything they had lost. It tasted of whiskey, salt, and regret. Mia's hands came up, grabbing the front of his shirt, clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in a collapsing world. He deepened the kiss, his other hand moving to her waist, pulling her up from the couch and flush against him. Her body was trembling, but she met his intensity, kissing him back with a desperation that matched his own. This was not about love. It was about survival. It was about two people, shattered by the same event, finally acknowledging the truth. It was a kiss that burned away the past, leaving only the raw, aching present. He felt the fragile bones of her back, the frantic beat of her heart against his chest. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers, both of them breathing hard. Her eyes were still closed, her lips parted, the moment stretched. Suspended and perfect, then reality crashed back in. He was Vincent Romano, the capo, and she was the woman who had just brought a war to his doorstep. He pulled back, his hands dropping from her. The cold air rushed back into the space between them. Mia's eyes opened, confused and hurt by the sudden rejection. Vincent turned away, running a hand through his dark hair. "I can't protect you if you're lying to me, Mia." It was the only defense he had left. She stood straight, her back rigid. The fear was still there, but something new had taken its place. Resolve. "I'm not lying," she said, her voice steady for the first time. "I've spent 6 years running. I'm done. Then I'll die telling the truth." Vincent looked at her, truly seeing the woman she had become. She was not the girl he remembered. She was a survivor, and she was his. Miles away, in the smoky back room of an Irish pub, Jace Hollow leaned back in his booth. The truce meeting had ended in chaos. He'd seen Romano bark. He'd seen the catering girl's face. He'd seen Romano lock the doors. His phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up, listening. "He took her," the voice on the other end said. "Left the hotel by the service exit. They're at the downtown safe house. The one on 5th, Jace smiled. It was a thin, ugly expression that did nothing to hide the scar that puckered his cheek. "So, the ghost is back." He hung up the phone and took a long drag from his cigarette. 6 years. He'd thought the girl was smart enough to stay buried. He'd let her run, thinking her fear would be enough to keep her silent. But now she was back, and she was with Romano. "It's time," he said to the two men sitting across from him. "Time to finish what we started." Back at the safe house, Vincent stood on the balcony, the cold night air biting at his skin. He had left Mia in the main room, a chasm of unspoken words between them. He made 2 calls. "Marco," he said into the phone, "I want everything you can find on a woman named Mia Lawson, and also Anna and Sarah and Jane. Any alias she might have used. I want to know where she ate, slept, and breathed for the last 6 years. Get our people on it now." He hung up and dialed another number. "Put 4 men on the service elevator and the lobby of the 5th Street building. Full rotation. No one gets in or out without my authorization. She's here, and Jace knows it." He ended the call and stayed outside, letting the cold seep into his bones. Later that night, Hours after he had retired to the guest bedroom, he heard a sound, a small, choked gasp. He rose, pulling on a pair of gray sweatpants, and moved into the main living area. Mia was in the kitchen, standing in the dark, her silhouette framed by the city lights. She was pouring a glass of water, her hand shaking so badly that water sloshed over the rim. She was wearing a simple gray t-shirt he had left for her, which swam on her small frame. A nightmare, he asked? She jumped, spinning around, her hand to her chest. Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. He walked toward her, taking the glass from her trembling hand and setting it on the counter. He took in her pale face, the sheen of cold sweat on her forehead. The same one? He asked softly. She nodded, not meeting his eyes. Jace, the gun. I see him every time I close my eyes. He stood in front of her, close enough to feel the faint warmth radiating from her skin. He didn't move to comfort her. He didn't offer empty words. He just stood there, a solid presence in the darkness. She finally looked up, her gaze meeting his. In the dark, there were no lies, no past, no titles. There was only a man and a woman, bound by a shared trauma. He reached out, his fingers brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek. It was a simple gesture, but it was more intimate than the kiss. She didn't flinch, didn't pull away. His hand lingered, his thumb stroking the soft skin of her temple. He won't touch you again, Vincent vowed, his voice a low rumble. I'll kill him first. Mia closed her eyes, leaning into his touch for a fraction of a second. It was a silent, fragile truce. It was a promise, and it was a declaration of war. The iron gates of the Romano estate loomed out of the pre-dawn mist, a black iron declaration of power and history. They opened with a silent, heavy groan, admitting the sedan into the long, cypress-lined driveway. Mia felt the gravel crunching under the tires in the pit of her stomach. She'd not been here in 6 years, not since the week before Leo's death. This place was not a home, it was a fortress, a museum of a life she had barely touched before it was torn away. Vincent had said nothing since they left the safe house. He had simply woken her, his face set, and told her to get dressed. The clothes he'd had delivered, dark jeans, a soft cashmere sweater, boots, felt like a costume. As the car pulled to a stop before the massive stone facade, Marco was waiting on the steps. His face, etched with a lifetime of worry, looked even more drawn in the gray morning light. He approached the car as Vincent stepped out, his gaze flickering to Mia in the passenger seat with undisguised alarm. "Boss," Marco said, his voice low, urgent. "The men are on alert, but bringing her here, to the family home." Vincent straightened his jacket, his presence seeming to suck the air from the morning. "She stays with me." "Vincent, this is an accelerant," Marco pleaded, gesturing back toward the car. "The Rikers are already spinning the story. They're saying you broke the truce. The other families are nervous. Having her here in your father's house, it's not just protection. It's a statement. It's a declaration of war." Vincent turned, his dark eyes flat and cold. He looked past Marco, his gaze sweeping over the half-dozen soldiers stationed, almost invisibly, in the shadows of the portico. "Listen," Vincent said, his voice quiet but carrying with absolute authority. "And listen well. Her name is Mia Lawson. She's under my protection. She's not leverage. She's not a negotiation. She is mine. Anyone. Riker, one of our own. I do not care. Anyone who touches her dies. Am I clear?" The men, seasoned soldiers who had seen Vincent gut rivals over shipping lanes, exchanged uneasy glances. This was not business. This was not the capo they knew. The boss was calculating, his anger a frozen, precise tool. This was something else. This was hot, personal, and profoundly dangerous. Passion was a liability, and their boss was suddenly drowning in it. "Get her bags," Vincent ordered, and walked to Mia's side, opening the door himself. He offered her his hand. She looked at it for a long second before placing her trembling hand in his. His grip was warm, impossibly firm. He pulled her gently from the car, his body shielding hers as he led her up the steps, past a stunned Marco and into the cavernous, silent house. The great hall smelled of old money, beeswax, and ghosts. A massive, unlit fireplace dominated one wall, and a staircase wide enough for a carriage curved up into the shadows. Vincent was called away almost immediately, a lieutenant murmuring in his ear about logistics and perimeter defense. "Stay here," he told her, his voice softening just enough for her to hear. "No one will bother you." Left alone, Mia drifted into the adjacent room, the grand study. Dark wood walls, shelves lined with leather-bound books that looked untouched, a globe, a heavy desk. This was his father's room. It was Vincent's room now. She ran her fingers along the back of a leather armchair. This was where she was supposed to have had Christmas dinner. This was the house she would have lived in as Mrs. Leo Romano. The thought of Leo brought a familiar, dull ache. He had been bright, loud, and charming. He was a performance. She'd been dazzled by the light he cast, only to realize, too late, that it was all surface. He had never seen her. He had only seen a beautiful accessory, someone to complete the picture of his life. And the lies. He had lied about everything, from his fidelity to his finances, all with a devastating smile. Her gaze drifted to the fireplace, and she remembered. It had been 6 years, and 2 months ago. A violent summer storm was rattling the old house. The thunder was so loud it shook the windows in their frames. Leo was out, as usual. He'd vaguely mentioned a bachelor party, but she knew he was with another woman. She hadn't even had the energy to be angry anymore. She'd been terrified of the storm, the flashes of lightning making the ancestral portraits in the hallway look like leering ghouls. Unable to sleep, she had padded downstairs in her silk robe, hoping to find a glass of milk, or perhaps something stronger. She'd found Vincent. He was in the study, the one she stood in now, sitting in the very armchair her hand was resting on. The only light came from the roaring fire he'd built, which cast dancing shadows across his face. He was nursing a glass of dark liquor, a book open in his lap. He had looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. "You're awake?" he'd stated. "The storm," she'd replied, feeling foolish, clutching her robe tighter. "And Leo isn't home. He rarely is," Vincent said, his voice a low rumble, devoid of judgment but heavy with fact. He stood, moving to the bar cart. "You're trembling. You don't like the thunder? It makes me feel exposed," she'd admitted. He poured a small amount of brandy into a snifter and handed it to her. His fingers brushed hers, a jolt of warmth that had nothing to do with the alcohol. "You are safer in this house than anywhere in the world. I won't let anything happen to it." She knew, instinctively. He wasn't talking about the house. He was talking about her. He, the quiet shadow, the older brother who always watched, had seen her. He saw her loneliness, her fear, her disillusionment with his brother. Another crack of thunder, louder this time, made her jump, sloshing the brandy. He reached out, his hands landing on her upper arms to steady her. The firelight played in his dark eyes. The scent of him, soap, old paper, and whiskey enveloped her. The silence stretched, filled only by the rain lashing the windows and the crackle of the fire. His grip on her arms was not brotherly. It was possessive. She looked up at him, and the world outside the small, warm circle of firelight ceased to exist. She had felt an overwhelming urge, a desperate need to confess. "Vincent, she'd started, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm marrying the wrong brother. I'm so scared. I think I love you." He knew. She saw the understanding in his eyes, and something else, a flash of a shared, forbidden longing, but he was, above all, loyal. He squeezed her arms once, a hard, painful grip, and then released her, stepping back into the shadows. "It's late. Mia, go to bed," he'd said, his voice suddenly harsh. "Leo will be home in the morning." He had dismissed her. He had chosen his brother, now, standing in the same room. She was snapped back to the present by his voice. "I'm surprised you remember this room." Vincent was standing in the doorway, watching her. The sun was setting, filling the room with a deep, bruised purple light. He had changed, just as she had, into a dark Henley and black pants. He looked less like a boss and more like the man by the fire. He was holding a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. I had the kitchen send up some food, but I thought this might be better. He walked past her, setting the glasses on the desk. He didn't turn on the lights. Instead, he crouched and began building a fire. The scrape of the match, the whoosh of the kindling catching, it all echoed the past so perfectly it made her ache. He poured the wine, a deep blood red, and handed her a glass. "They're checking the perimeter. We're alone for the night." They sat, not on the chairs, but on the thick Persian rug, the fire warming their faces. They drank in silence for a moment. "You knew," she said. Not a question, but a statement. "That night, with the storm, you knew I was miserable." Vincent stared into the flames, swirling the wine in his glass. "I knew Leo. He was my brother, and I loved him, but he was a shallow creature. He broke everything he touched. And you," she whispered, "you just watched." "It was my duty," he said, his voice rough. "To the family, to him. You were his. I had no right." "And now?" He turned to look at her. The firelight hollowed his cheeks and lit his eyes. "He's gone. You are not his. You are not anyone's." He set his glass down. "I spent 6 years trying to believe you were a monster, a traitor. I hunted for any proof that you were in on it. And did you find it?" "No, I found nothing. Just a ghost." He reached out, his hand hovering, before he finally touched her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "It was easier to hate you, Mia. It was easier than admitting I wanted you, even when you were wearing my brother's ring. It was easier than admitting I failed to protect you." The confession hung in the air, raw and dangerous. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "I was so afraid of you," she said, "but I was always more afraid of him." That was all it took. He moved, setting his own glass aside. His other hand came up, cupping her face, pulling her toward him. Their lips met. It was not the bruising, desperate kiss from the safe house. This was slow. It was a question, an exploration, an apology. It was 6 years of lost time, of what-ifs, of grief and longing, all compressed into a single, devastating touch. The taste of the wine was on his lips, rich and dark. Her hands found his chest, gripping the soft material of his shirt. He deepened the kiss, a low sound vibrating in his chest. It was a kiss of profound, aching sadness and of a desperate, emerging hope. He pulled back, just an inch, his forehead resting against hers. "I'm not him," he whispered. "I know," she replied. His hands moved from her face, down her neck, to the buttons of the silk shirt they had given her. His movements were slow, deliberate. He watched her face as he undid the first button, his knuckles grazing her skin. She shivered, but not from cold. Her eyes never left his. He undid the next, and the next. The firelight kissed her skin as he parted the fabric. He lowered his head, his lips tracing the path from her collarbone to the hollow of her throat. It was not a rush, it was a worship. Every touch was heavy with meaning, a promise to erase the past. She arched into him, her fingers tangling in his thick hair, pulling him closer. He lifted her then, his arms strong around her waist, settling her more comfortably on the rug, his body a warm, solid weight covering hers. It was a slow unraveling, a tender reclamation. It was the crackle of the fire, the scent of old wine, the soft sound of their breathing, and the overwhelming feeling of finally. It was a quiet, desperate collision, not of bodies, but of souls that had been orbiting each other in pain for far too long. It was the storm, and it was the shelter. All at once. Later, much later, the fire had burned down to glowing embers. Mia was asleep, her head on his chest, her breathing deep and even for the first time in 6 years. She looked truly peaceful. Vincent, however, was wide awake. He stared at the ornate ceiling, his arm possessively around her, his fingers lightly tracing her spine. The conflict he'd held at bay for 2 days was now raging. He was the capo. His entire life was a series of calculations. Duty, loyalty, power. His city was a powder keg, and he was holding the match. Jace Hollow was not a fool. He had wanted this, He had wanted Vincent to break, and this woman in his arms was his single greatest weakness. Protecting her, claiming her as he had just done, would cost him. It would cost him alliances. It would cost him money. It might cost him his empire. He looked down at her. Her dark hair splayed across his skin. He remembered the scent of jasmine, the terror in her eyes, the way she felt in his arms. He had made his choice. He had chosen her over his brother's memory. He would choose her over everything else. The illusion of peace shattered with the first light. A sharp, frantic knock came at the study door before Marco burst in, not waiting for an answer. His face was ashen. Mia startled awake, sitting up, clutching the blanket to her chest. "Vincent," Marco said, his voice strained. "There's been an incident." Vincent was already on his feet, pulling on his pants, his face hardening back into the mask of the boss. "What?" "The Southside warehouse. Warehouse 12. It's gone. A bomb detonated an hour ago. 3 of our men were inside." Marco's voice broke. "They're gone. Vincent, Jace. He sent a message. He said it's the first. He wants the girl. He said to give her up, or the city burns." Mia's hand flew to her mouth, a strangled sob escaping. The peace of the night was obliterated, replaced by the cold, metallic taste of guilt. Vincent's rage was a palpable thing. It was cold, silent, and absolute. The conflict of the night was gone, burned away. "He wants a war," Vincent said, his voice a low, lethal vibration. "He gets one. Get the men ready. I'm going to find Jace, and I'm going to pull his heart out through his throat." "No!" Mia scrambled up, the blanket falling away, uncaring. She ran to him, grabbing his arm. "No, Vincent, please. This is what he wants. He's provoking you. More people will die. Because of me." She was trembling again, the terror back in her eyes. "I'll go," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I'll disappear again. I'm good at it. I can go where no one will ever find me. Just, please, don't let anyone else get hurt." Vincent turned, grabbing her by the shoulders. His grip was iron, his eyes blazing, not with anger at her, but with a terrifying, possessive fury at the world. "Disappear?" he snarled. "You are done disappearing. You ran from them. You hid from me. That is over." He pulled her flush against him, his gaze locking with hers. "You're mine now. And no one takes what's mine." The air in the private dining room of Il Corvo was colder than the winter air outside. The restaurant was closed, its heavy velvet curtains drawn, the only light coming from a muted chandelier above the long table. It was neutral ground, but it felt like a tomb. Vincent sat at the head of the table. Marco stood behind him, his hand resting on the back of his chair. Seated on either side were the heads of the other 2 families. Don Falcone, a man in his late 60s with eyes like chips of slate, and Emilio Thierry, younger, pragmatic, who ran the Northern Territories with corporate precision. "You called this meeting." "Vincent," Falcone said, his voice a gravelly rasp. "You broke bread with Riker. You set the truce. Now, one of your warehouses is a smoking hole in the ground, and 3 of your men are gone. This is not our problem." "It became our problem," Vincent said, his voice dangerously quiet. "When Jace Hollow used an explosive that violated every accord we have held for 30 years. He didn't just hit me. Falcone, he used a car bomb on the street. He is sending a message that the rules are gone." Thierry leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Let's be precise. He's sending you a message. Romano. The word on the street is that this is not about territory. It is about the woman, the ghost, Leo's fiancée, the one you are keeping at your family estate." Falcone nodded, his expression sour. "You are protecting her. Jace wants her. This is a personal dispute. Vincent, you are asking the commission to sanction a war over a woman?" "I am telling the commission," Vincent corrected, his gaze moving between the 2 men, "that Jace Hollow has broken the peace. He killed my brother 6 years ago. He murdered my men yesterday. He's wiping his feet on our traditions. The woman is the excuse." "She is the cause," Falcone insisted, slapping a hand on the table. "He is offering a solution. It's one woman. Give her up. It's clean. You end this before it spills over and starts costing us money." Vincent stared at Falcone, a long, unnerving silence stretching through the room. The air crackled. When Vincent finally spoke, his voice was stripped of all emotion, leaving only the cold, hard steel beneath. Then let me be clear, so there is no confusion. He rose slowly to his feet, his shadow falling long across the table. She's not on the table. She's off the table. She's not a negotiation. She is mine. This meeting is not a request for permission. It is a notification. I am going to end Jace Hollow. You will stay out of my way. He turned to Thierry. Today. He bombs my warehouse because he claims I have something of his. Tomorrow. He will bomb your depots. Thierry, because he decides he wants them. This is not about the girl. This is about a rabid dog testing his chain. Thierry looked uneasy, but Falcone was furious. You threaten us, boy. You bring your personal weakness to this table and you give us orders? I am giving you a warning, Vincent said. He buttoned his jacket. Anyone in this room, or outside of it, who suggests handing her over, who so much as speaks her name in a whisper to one of Riker's men, answers directly to me. Think very carefully, Don Falcone, about whose side you are on. He turned and walked out. Marco following, the meeting was over. He had drawn his line in blood. Mia heard the car return. She heard the front door slam, a sound of contained violence. She was in the study, where she had spent the day, a prisoner in an opulent cage. She heard Marco's voice, sharp with panic. You threatened them. Vincent, you threatened Falcone over the girl. They needed to understand the new terms. Vincent's voice was low, fatigued. What they understand is that you're compromised, that you are choosing her over the stability of this city. 3 men are dead, Vincent, good men, and more will follow, all because you won't let her go. The silence that followed was worse than the shouting. Mia sank into the leather chair, the blood draining from her face. 3 men are dead. The words echoed, mixing with the memories of Jace Hollow's voice, the smell of gunpowder, the 6 years of running. She had brought this, her return, her scent, her existence. She was a plague. She had brought the war to his doorstep, and now his men were dying for her. She waited. Hours passed. The house grew quiet, a heavy, suffocating stillness. She knew the guards were patrolling the grounds, that the gates were locked, that she was the most protected liability in the city. Just after 2 a.m, she found a heavy sheaf of stationery in the desk drawer and a fountain pen. Her hand was shaking, but her resolve was firm. Vincent, I'm sorry. I heard Marco. The men who died are my fault. I won't be the reason anyone else gets hurt. I won't let you trade your empire for a ghost. This is the only way to stop it. He wants me. He can have me. But I won't let him use me to destroy you. Don't look for me. I was a ghost once. I can be one again. Mia. She folded the note, leaving it in the center of the dark, polished desk. She moved silently. She wore the dark jeans and sweater, the boots. She knew the patrol routes now, the blind spots in the security system. She made it down the servants' staircase, through the kitchen, and out a side door into the freezing night air. The grounds were vast, covered in a light frost that crunched under her boots. She kept to the shadows of the cypress trees, her heart hammering against her ribs. The main gate was visible, 100 yards away, a black iron spiderweb against the weak moonlight. She was running, her breath pluming in front of her. When she reached it, she grabbed the cold bars, pulling, searching for a latch, a weakness. It was immovable. Where do you think you're going? The voice was not a shout. It was a low, fractured growl, coming from the shadows right beside her. Mia spun, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. Vincent emerged from the darkness. He wasn't in a suit. He was in the same dark clothes as the night before, his hair undone, his face a mask of such terrifying fury that she took a step back, hitting the gate. Let me go, Vincent, she whispered, her voice trembling. Go where? He advanced on her, his steps slow, predatory. Back to Jace? You think he'll just let you disappear? You think this ends with you running? You walk out that gate, you're dead in an hour. It's better than you dying, she cried, the tears freezing on her cheeks. It's better than your men. I heard Marco. 3 men are dead because of me. Their deaths are on Jace, he roared, grabbing her. his fingers biting into her shoulders. "Not you! He wants me. If I'm gone, the war stops. It never stops." He shook her, his control snapping. It wasn't just anger. It was a raw, primal terror. "You don't get it, do you? You leaving is not a solution." "It's his victory. You run from me. You are running straight to him. Why do you even care?" she screamed, hitting his chest, a useless, frantic drumming. "I'm not worth it. I'm not worth your family, your city, your life. Let me go." "Why?" He stilled her, his grip like iron, his face inches from hers. He looked broken, the fury collapsing into a raw, agonizing vulnerability. "You want to know why?" His voice dropped, thick with 6 years of unprocessed grief. "Because I spent 6 years hating you. I told myself you were a traitor. I forced myself to believe you set Leo up, that you were laughing, spending his money. I hated you because it was the only way I could stop." He choked on the words. "It was the only way I could survive thinking that you were gone, that you never cared, that what I felt, that we meant nothing." The confession hung in the freezing air. A wound ripped open. She slapped him. The sound was sharp, shocking, echoing in the night. It wasn't a slap of anger. It was a slap of agony, a reaction to the depth of his pain, the years he had wasted, the accusation that she hadn't cared. He stared at her, his cheek burning red, his eyes wide with shock, and in that second she saw it. He wasn't holding her captive to win a war. He was holding her because he was terrified of losing her all over again. She grabbed his face, her frozen fingers tangling in his hair, and pulled him down to her. She kissed him. It was not a kiss of tenderness. It was a collision. It was frantic, brutal, and full of all the rage and fear they both felt. It was a kiss that said, "I am here. You are real. Do not let me go." He kissed her back, a groan of pure desperation tearing from his throat. He lifted her from her feet, her legs instinctively wrapping around his waist, her body flush against his. He carried her, his mouth never leaving hers, stumbling back toward the house. He kicked the side door shut, the sound echoing through the kitchen. He didn't take her to the bedroom. He pinned her against the cold plaster wall of the great hall, his mouth devouring hers. This was not the slow, healing passion of the night before. This was raw, desperate, final. It was the fear of tomorrow made physical. "You are not leaving," he growled against her mouth, his hands gripping her waist so tightly it would bruise. "I'm not leaving," she sobbed, a vow, a surrender. His hands were rough, tangled in her sweater, pulling it up, needing to feel her skin. Her hands were at his shirt, pulling, needing to feel his heart beat against hers. It was a desperate, hurried claiming, a frantic grounding in the middle of a storm. They were anchoring each other, a raw, possessive, aching act that was less about love and more about a desperate, shared survival. This was the kiss, the touch, of the condemned, trying to feel alive one last time before the world ended. The morning light was gray and unforgiving. The house was on edge, a fortress preparing for siege. They were in the study, dressed, drinking coffee they didn't taste. The passion of the night had cooled, leaving a heavy, somber intimacy. A sound from the driveway, not a car, but shouting. Vincent was moving before Marco even reached the door. They burst onto the front steps. A black van was peeling away, leaving a crumpled shape on the gravel. It was a man. He was wearing the Romano colors. "Enzo," Marco whispered, his voice sick. He ran down the steps. It was one of Vincent's top lieutenants. He was alive, but only just. He was beaten, broken, pinned to his jacket. With a hunting knife was a small, white envelope. Vincent stalked down the steps, his face a mask of stone. He pulled the knife from the jacket, ignoring Enzo's groan, and ripped the note open. It contained 3 words. Mia had followed, standing in the doorway, her hand over her mouth. "Vincent," she whispered. He crumpled the paper in his fist, his knuckles white. He looked up, his eyes black holes of pure, undiluted hatred. "Get him inside. Get the doctor," he ordered Marco. He turned and walked back into the study. He went to a secure phone, one that sat on a separate, dedicated line. He punched in a number. "It's Vincent. I'm calling in the favor. The one from Boston, your brother's gambling debt. I need Jace Hollow. I need his location, not where he was, where he will be tonight." He listened, his body rigid. "I don't care what it costs. You owe me. Find him." He hung up the phone. The die was cast. The war was no longer coming. It was here. That night, the house was silent, but it was the silence of a held breath. Men with automatic weapons moved in the shadows of the lawn. Vincent and Mia were in the bedroom. They lay on top of the covers, fully clothed, the only light coming from the moon filtering through the heavy curtains. She was curled against his side, his arm locked around her. The frantic passion was gone, replaced by a heavy, terrifying calm. "Are you scared?" she whispered into his shirt. He was silent for a long time. He stroked her hair, his hand steady. "I'm angry," he finally said. He kissed her forehead, a long, lingering press of his lips. "He will not touch you. I will end this before the sun comes up." She just held him tighter, her face buried in his chest, breathing in his scent. "Come back to me," she whispered. "I always will," he replied, and they lay there, listening to the silence, waiting for the dawn, not knowing if they would see it together. The pre-dawn air was cold and sharp, smelling of river water and rust. Vincent moved through the shadows of the shipping yard like a wraith. The warehouse loomed in front of them, a massive, corrugated steel box. It was silent, too silent. He had 20 men with him, his best. They moved in perfect, rehearsed formations, securing the perimeter, their weapons fitted with suppressors. Marco was at his side, his face grim. "This is too easy," Marco whispered, his breath a small cloud. "He's arrogant," Vincent replied, his voice a low rumble. He checked the magazine of his sidearm. "He thinks he's smarter than us. He wants to prove it." At his signal, 2 men breached the side door. They fanned out, clearing the entrance, then signaled, "All clear." Vincent and the main team entered, fanning out into the cavernous darkness. The warehouse was vast, a cathedral of empty shelves. In the exact center of the concrete floor sat a single metal desk, and on the desk, a single, old-fashioned rotary phone. As they approached, it began to ring. The sound was shrill, impossibly loud in the emptiness. Vincent's men trained their weapons on the darkness, expecting an ambush. Vincent just stared at the phone. He walked to the desk, his men forming a tight perimeter around him, and picked up the receiver. "You came." Jace Hollow's voice was slick, amused. "I'm flattered. Romano. You brought all your best toys. Where are you? Jace?" Vincent's voice was calm, but the pressure in his chest was building. This was wrong. Where I needed to be. You see, I knew you couldn't resist. The great Vincent Romano, having to prove he's still the king. Jace laughed, a dry, grating sound. "But you're not the only one who can set a trap. You like your brother's ghosts so much? I figured you should have a house full of them." The line went dead. Vincent's blood turned to ice. A house full of them. He didn't drop the phone. He placed it carefully back on the receiver. "It's a trap," he said, his voice flat. He turned to Marco. "He's not here. He's at the estate." Marco's face went white. "Boss." "Get the cars," Vincent roared, all pretense of calm shattering. "Now, all of you, back to the estate." He was already running, his soldiers scrambling behind him, sprinting across the vast, empty floor. They were a mile away. They would never make it. The first explosion was not loud. It was a heavy, sickening thump that Mia felt in the soles of her feet. The porcelain coffee cup in her hand rattled against the saucer. She was in the study, watching the sun paint the edges of the distant hills. The sound came from the south wing. Before she could process it, the house alarms erupted, a deafening, unified shriek. She heard a shout from the hall, not a command, but a cry of surprise. It was cut short by the unmistakable, terrifying pop-pop-pop of gunfire. Not from outside, from inside. She ran to the study door. Yanking it open, the grand foyer was in chaos. 2 of Vincent's men were on the floor, and 3 men in black combat gear were advancing up the main staircase. "He's at the estate." Jace wasn't waiting. He had hit them both at the same time. She slammed the study door, locking the heavy deadbolt. She heard the wood crack as a bullet slammed into it from the other side. They knew where she was. The panic room. Vincent's words from the night before. His voice low and urgent. Behind the biography of my father. You push the book. The wall will open. There is a phone. You call me. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely find the book. She shoved it. A section of the heavy, dark wood shelving clicked and swung inward, revealing a narrow opening and a reinforced steel door. She scrambled inside, pulling the heavy bookcase shut behind her. It muffled the sounds, but she could still hear them, shouting, pounding on the study door. She fumbled for the steel door, pulling it closed, and threw the 3 heavy deadbolts. The small space, no bigger than a closet, was plunged into absolute darkness. She was hyperventilating, her back pressed against the cold steel. The only light came from a single green LED on a small, wall-mounted phone, a secure line. Her fingers fumbled. Slipping on the keypad, she dialed the number he had made her memorize. It rang once. Mia. Vincent's voice was not a question. It was raw, torn from his throat. Vincent, she sobbed, the terror breaking through. They're here. They're in the house. There was an explosion. There's gunfire. Oh, God, they're right outside the door. Are you in the room? His voice was tight, strained over the sound of a roaring engine. Yes, I'm in the room. I'm locked in. But they're trying to get in. Vincent, I can hear them. The pounding on the outer study door stopped, replaced by splintering wood. They had breached it. Now the heavy metallic thud of a boot kicking the panic room door began. They're here. They're at the door, she screamed. Mia, listen to me. His voice cut through her panic, a blade of pure, cold command. I am coming. I am 5 minutes away. You are in a steel box. They cannot get through that door without a torch, and they do not have that much time. Do you hear me? Yes, she whispered, her body trembling. You keep this line open. Do not hang up. I'm coming back. His voice was a lifeline. She slid down the wall, clutching the phone, listening to the impossible sounds of the assault, the thudding on the door, the distant, muffled shouts, the terrifying crackle of fire. Vincent, I smell smoke, she said, her voice small. Hold on, he repeated. The words were a prayer, a threat. Just hold on. The pounding on the door stopped. She held her breath. A voice, familiar, shouted from the other side. Mia, it's me, Antonio. Are you in there? Antonio. The young guard, the one who had smiled at her yesterday. They're setting fires, he shouted, his voice high with panic. The whole house is burning. You have to get out of there. I can get you out the back. Open the door. She looked at the phone, at the single green light. Vincent was on his way, but the smell of smoke was acrid, burning her throat. Mia, hurry, we don't have time. They're everywhere, please. He sounded terrified. He was one of Vincent's men. He was here to help. The fire. I'm coming, she yelled, her hands shaking, went to the deadbolts. She pulled the first one back. Thank God, he breathed. Hurry! She pulled the second bolt, the third. She cracked the heavy steel door. Antonio was there, his face black with soot, his uniform torn. We have to go, he said, reaching for her. And in the smoke-filled study behind him, she saw them. 2 other men. Not in Romano uniforms. They were wearing Riker's colors. Antonio's face twisted, his panic dissolving into a cruel, triumphant sneer. Jace pays better. Sweetheart. He grabbed her arm, yanking her forward. It was not a scream. It was a roar. The sound of betrayal, of 6 years of terror. She threw her entire body weight backward, pulling the immensely heavy steel door with her. Antonio's hand was caught. The door slammed shut on his wrist and forearm. He screamed, a high, agonizing sound, but the momentum had pulled him partially into the tiny room. He shoved the door back with his good shoulder, stumbling in, his face a mask of rage. You stupid! He never finished. Mia didn't run. She wasn't that girl anymore. She grabbed the heavy red fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. It was a 10-pound steel cylinder. She raised it high over her head and brought it down with every ounce of fear and fury she possessed. It connected with his temple with a sickening, wet crack. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed at her feet, a dead weight. The two Riker men were now throwing their shoulders against the door, trying to force their way in. She was trapped. Trapped with a body, with the smell of smoke now pouring under the door, and with the sounds of her attackers just inches away. The armored sedan didn't slow down. It rocketed through the iron gates, which were already shattered, and rammed the side of a black Riker van at full speed. The sound of a high-speed collision, of screeching tires and buckling metal, was the only warning. Vincent was out before the car stopped moving. He, Marco, and three of his best men moved like a single and dark entity toward the house. The front of the estate was a vision from hell. The entire south wing was engulfed in flames, black smoke pouring from the shattered windows. "Boss, the fire!" Marco yelled. "She's in the study," Vincent said, his voice flat. He chambered around. "Kill them all!" He moved through the front doorway, which was nothing but a smoking, splintered hole. The grand foyer was an abattoir. Flames were crawling up the curtains. Two Riker men, armed with assault rifles, were at the base of the main staircase, pouring gasoline. They looked up, their eyes wide with surprise. Vincent didn't break stride. He raised his handgun. 2 shots, 1 for each. They were precise, economical, and utterly final. The men dropped. "MIA!" he roared, his voice echoing over the crackle of the inferno. He heard it, a faint, desperate pounding, from the study. He kicked the burning remnants of the study door off its hinges. The room was a furnace, the priceless books, the antique desk. All of it was ablaze, in the back. The wall of shelving was scorched black. "Mia, stand back from the door." He slammed his shoulder into the hot steel. It didn't budge. He did it again, a raw, desperate sound tearing from his throat. The lock, damaged in the fight, finally gave. The door flew open. She stumbled out, a small, soot-covered figure, her hair wild, a bloody gash weeping on her forehead. She was gasping, coughing, her eyes wide with terror. She saw him, and she fell. He caught her, pulling her against his chest, his hand instantly going to her back, her hair, assuring himself she was real. "You're alive," he breathed, his face buried in her smoky hair. He was a traitor," she choked out, pointing a trembling finger at Antonio's body on the floor. Vincent glanced down. "Good." He said it with a chilling finality. He scooped her up, lifting her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. The fire was roaring now, the heat unbearable. "Marco, we're out," he yelled. He moved back into the foyer, shielding her body with his own. As they reached the doorway, the massive, burning staircase behind them finally gave way, collapsing into the hall in a cascade of fire and thunder. Vincent didn't look back. He carried her through the smoke, past the bodies, and out onto the frosted lawn. He put her into the back of the running sedan, shouting at Marco, "Drive! Get us to the cabin, now!" They drove for 2 hours, climbing, leaving the sirens and the burning city behind. The paved roads gave way to gravel, then to a dirt track winding high into the mountains. The cabin was small, built of dark pine, hidden in a grove of ancient trees. It smelled of wood smoke and cedar. It was a place of absolute silence. He carried her inside, setting her gently on the simple queen bed. The adrenaline was gone, leaving them both shaking. He looked at her, the soot on her face, the wildness in her eyes, the blood that he had almost let be spilled. "You're bleeding," he said, his voice hoarse. He went to a bathroom, grabbing a clean cloth and a metal first aid box. He sat on the bed beside her, his large, calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he cleaned the gash on her forehead. It was deep, an inch long, right above her eyebrow. "It needs stitches," he said. He opened the kit, pulling out a sterilized, curved needle and a thread. His hands, the same hands that had held a gun with perfect lethal stillness, were trembling. He couldn't make them stop. He threaded the needle, his fingers clumsy, his breath catching. "Vincent," she whispered, reaching up, her small, sooty hand covering his. "It's okay. I'm safe." He looked at her, his dark eyes stripped bare, all the power, all the rage, gone. All that was left was the raw terror of a man who had almost lost the only thing he had ever truly wanted. "I almost lost you," he whispered. "But you didn't," she said. He took a sharp, steadying breath. "This will sting." He bent his head, his focus absolute, and pushed the needle through her skin. His hands were still shaking. He had finished the last stitch, his hands still shaking so violently he could barely tie the knot. He cut the thread with a pair of surgical scissors from the kit, his breath ragged. The small, neat line of black thread above her eyebrow was a stark accusation against her pale, soot-stained skin. He set the tools aside, his hands dropping to his knees. He stared at them, large, scarred, and useless. They had trembled. He, who could break a man's neck without a tremor, had shaken while trying to mend the woman he loved. He lowered his head, his shoulders hitching. A sound tore from his throat, a dry, agonizing sound that was half groan, half sob. "I failed," he whispered. The words fractured. He was the capo. He was the king, and his fortress had burned. His men were dead or broken. The woman he had sworn to protect had a gash on her face because he had been lured away, his pride used against him like a common weapon. "He played me. He used me to get to you. The house, the men, Enzo, this—" His fingers gently, agonizingly, brushed the air an inch from her stitches. "This is my fault. I let this happen." He broke. The iron control that had defined his entire existence shattered, and he covered his face with his hands, his body shaking with the force of his self-loathing. Mia watched him, her heart aching. This was not the boss. This was not the monster of the underworld. This was the man who had stared at the ceiling all night, terrified of what the dawn would bring. She moved, shifting on the simple bed, until she was kneeling in front of him. She took his hands, pulling them away from his face. His skin was cold, his eyes squeezed shut, ashamed of his own weakness. "No," she said, her voice firm, clear. She held his face, her thumbs brushing away the moisture in the corners of his eyes. "You are wrong." He tried to pull away. "Mia, Look at me," she commanded. He opened his eyes. They were raw, haunted. 6 years ago," she said, her voice steady. "Jace Hollow put a gun in my mouth and I ran. I spent 6 years being a ghost, terrified of my own shadow. Today, a traitor tried to hand me over to him, and I hit him with a fire extinguisher." A small, pained smile touched her lips. "You didn't fail. Vincent, you came back. You walked through fire, and you pulled me out. You saved me. What happened before? That was war? But you saved me." He stared at her, his breathing still ragged. He saw the woman in front of him, not the ghost from the hotel, not the broken victim from the safe house. He saw the woman who had survived him, survived his brother, survived Jace, the woman who had just stitched his soul back together. He leaned his forehead against hers, his eyes closing. "I will not lose you," he vowed. It was a promise to himself, to God, to her. She kissed him. It was not a kiss of passion or desperation or fear. It was a kiss of pure, profound acceptance. It was slow, soft, and healing. It tasted of smoke and tears, and underneath it all, a promise of peace. He lifted his head, his dark eyes searching hers, asking a question he could not voice. She answered by taking his hand, the one that had trembled, and kissing his palm. She kissed the scars on his knuckles, the calluses, the skin of the man who was both killer and savior. He lowered her gently back onto the bed. This time, there was no firelight, no frantic haste, no fear of the morning. There was only the quiet mountain air and the soft light of the moon filtering through the pine trees. He moved with an agonizing, deliberate slowness, his hands no longer shaking, undressed her with a reverence that bordered on worship. He memorized every line, every shadow. He kissed the bruise on her shoulder, the palms of her hands, the pulse in her throat. His touch was a vow of protection, a silent apology. She met his tenderness with her own. Her hands explored him, not in desperation, but in discovery. She traced the old, faded scar on his ribs, the hard lines of his chest, the muscles of his arms. She was learning him. When he finally came to her, it was a union of absolute trust. It was the furthest thing from the violence they had escaped. It was a slow, deep, and mindful joining, a conscious act of healing. It was two broken halves of a single soul finally locking into place. It was the quiet, deliberate, and final act of commitment, a promise made in the silence of the mountains that they would never, ever be alone again. The sun was high when the secure phone buzzed on the bedside table, a harsh, unwelcome intrusion. Vincent stirred, his body heavy with sleep, his arm tightening instinctively around Mia's waist. She was nestled against his chest, truly asleep for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. He reached over, careful not to wake her, and answered the call. "What? Boss?" It was Marco. His voice was exhausted, but held a note of stunned disbelief. It's over. In a way." Vincent sat up slowly, rubbing his face. "Talk." "The FBI. They hit Riker's operation, all of it. A coordinated, citywide sweep. They hit his import houses, his cash rooms. They arrested Silas Riker himself, coming out of his penthouse." "How?" Vincent was stunned. The feds moved slowly. This was surgical. "One of Jace's men," Marco explained. "The one we interrogated after he delivered Enzo. The feds must have picked him up, and he sang everything. He gave them Jace, Riker, the whole organization, to save his own skin." Vincent felt a cold wave of something he didn't recognize. It wasn't relief. And Jace? Did they get Jace? There was a pause. "No, boss, that's the problem. Jace wasn't there. He wasn't at any of the locations. He's in the wind. The feds have a warrant, but he's gone. Vanished." Vincent looked at Mia, her face soft in the morning light. The black stitches a stark reminder. Gone, but not gone. Jace was a snake. He would hide, he would heal, and he would come back. He would never stop. "Thank you, Marco," Vincent said, his voice flat. "Handle the commission. Tell them the war is over. Riker is gone. I have one last piece of business." He hung up the phone. Mia stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Vincent, what is it?" "Riker's been arrested," he said, his voice gentle. "The organization is broken." He saw the wave of pure, unadulterated relief wash over her. The tears that welled in her eyes were tears of joy. "It's over. It's finally over." He kissed her forehead, smoothing her hair. "Almost." He stood up, pulling on his clothes from the day before. They were still stained with soot and blood. "He's still out there. Jace, as long as he is breathing, you will never be safe." Her relief vanished, replaced by the old, familiar fear. "No, Vincent, let the feds get him. We can run. We can go. Right now." He turned, his face set in the old, hard lines of the capo. "I have run you across this state. I have hidden you. And he still burned my home and put his hands on you. Running is not a solution. It's a delay." He walked to the door, picking up his keys. "Where are you going?" she cried, sitting up, clutching the sheet to her chest. "I am going to end this," he said. He looked back at her, his eyes dark, but full of the love he had shown her hours before. "I'm going to keep my promise. I will be back." He didn't go back to the city. He drove to a payphone at a gas station 20 miles down the mountain. He dialed the number of the Riker defector whose debt he'd called in. "He's running," Vincent said. "The feds are on him. Where is his panic button?" The man was terrified. "You didn't hear this from me. A private airstrip 30 miles north of the city. He keeps a plane there, fueled. If he's running now." Vincent was in his car before the man finished the sentence. The airstrip was a gray, lonely slash of asphalt cut into the rolling hills. A thin fog clung to the ground. A single black Learjet sat at the end of the runway, its engines whining, preparing for takeoff. Jace Hollow was walking fast, carrying a single duffel bag, his head down. A car door slammed. Jace froze. He looked up. Vincent was standing 30 yards away, next to his car, blocking the path. He was alone. Jace's lip curled into that familiar, ugly sneer. "Of course. The king, coming to see me off. You're too late, Romano. Your city is burning, your girl is damaged goods, and I'm walking away." "You are not walking anywhere," Vincent said. Jace laughed, dropping his bag. "You think this is a movie? You think you're going to shoot me? You kill me, you're no better than I am." He unzipped his jacket, showing he was unarmed. "What now, boss? You gonna shoot an unarmed man? That's not your style." Vincent began to walk toward him, his steps measured, steady. He wasn't reaching for a weapon. "You're right," Vincent said, his voice a low growl. "Shooting is too clean. It's too fast." Jace's smile faltered. He was a creature of traps and ambushes. This was not in his plan. He readied himself, dropping into a fighter's stance. Vincent didn't slow down. When he was 5 feet away, Jace lunged, a knife appearing in his hand as if from nowhere, aimed at Vincent's gut. Vincent moved with a speed that defied his size. He didn't block the knife. He moved into it, taking the blade on his forearm, a deep, slicing cut. He used the momentum to grab Jace's wrist with one hand and his throat with the other. He slammed Jace onto the asphalt, the breath exploding from his lungs. The fight was not a fight. It was an execution. It was 6 years of rage, for Leo, for Mia, for his burning home, for his dead men, all distilled into a brutal, physical end. Jace was fast, but Vincent was fueled by something Jace could not understand. He felt the knife slash his arm again, felt his knuckles crack against Jace's jaw. It was a flurry of raw, primal violence. Vincent broke Jace's wrist, the snap of the bone echoing in the fog. The knife clattered on the runway. Jace was on his back, gasping, his face a mask of blood and terror. He had finally met a monster bigger than himself. Vincent knelt over him, his hand on Jace's throat, squeezing the life from him. Jace clawed at his hands, his eyes bulging. She was worth it, Jace choked out, a final, bloody-toothed grin. To see you fall." Vincent pulled his gun from the back of his waistband. He pressed the muzzle against Jace's chest, just above his heart. "That," Vincent said, his voice a cold whisper, "was for Leo." He moved the gun 2 inches. "This is for her." He pulled the trigger. The sound was flat, final. He stood up, his body aching, blood dripping from his arm. He left Jace on the runway and walked back to his car. The jet engine whined, then powered down. The war was over. Mia was standing on the porch when his car pulled up. He got out, moving like an old man. His shirt was soaked, dark, dark red. He walked up the steps, his eyes never leaving hers. He looked empty. He reached the top step, and the last of his strength gave out. He stumbled, collapsing into her. She caught him, her arms wrapping around his torso, holding his full weight as he buried his face in her neck. He was shaking, not with fear, but with the massive, adrenaline-fueled release of a lifetime of violence. She held him, her cheek pressed to the top of his head. She didn't cry. She didn't ask what happened. She just held him, her small frame a pillar of strength, a sanctuary. 2 weeks later, Vincent sat in a sterile downtown office. Marco stood across from him, staring at a stack of signed papers on the desk. "I don't understand," Marco said, his voice strained. "You're just leaving. The commission, the families. You're just handing it to me?" Vincent stood and walked to the window. Down on the street, Mia was leaning against a simple, unassuming sedan, her hair bright in the sun. "The war is over, Marco. The city is stable. Jace is gone. Riker is gone. The family is stronger than ever. It's yours. You've earned it. But what about you?" Vincent smiled, a small, genuine smile. "I've got something better to protect now." 6 months later, the air smelled of grapes and warm earth. The city was a distant, hazy memory. Here, there were rolling hills, covered in row after row of grapevines, baking in the late afternoon sun. Vincent drove a tractor, his hands calloused from tools, not weapons. He wore jeans and a faded work shirt, his skin dark from the sun. He was building a vineyard, from nothing. He cut the engine, the silence of the valley rushing in. He saw Mia walking toward him from the small, white farmhouse they had rebuilt, a bottle of wine in one hand, 2 glasses in the other. He jumped down, meeting her. She looked healthy, her face full, her eyes bright. The small scar above her eyebrow was pale, almost invisible. That evening, they sat on the porch, watching the sun set the sky on fire. It was peaceful, a life so simple. He never could have imagined it. A warm breeze drifted up the valley, carrying the scent from the garden Mia had planted by the porch. He closed his eyes. Jasmine. But this time, it was not the scent of a ghost. It was not a memory of betrayal, or loss, or a near miss in a hotel suite. It was the scent of his life. He smiled. He opened his eyes, turned, and saw her watching him. He leaned in, pulling her close, and kissed her deeply. It was a kiss that held no past and no future. It was just now, and it was enough. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We truly hope you enjoyed it. Where in the world are you listening from? Let us know in the comments below. If you love this story, please be sure to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Romance Stories, so you never miss a new chapter. We would love to hear your thoughts on Vincent and Mia's journey. Please share your comments with us in English. We read every single one.